everybody. Everybody hear me okay?
Yep. Sounds good.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. Thank you to Bridget for having me here. This is really exciting. I'm going to pretend you're 10,000 people in a really big room, sort of. But you all get the alpha version, so I'm excited to get feedback from all of you. So, hi, KubeCon. It's wonderful to be here. It's a real honor to be chosen. And I was thinking when I got invited here what I would want to convey to the entirety of the Kubernetes community. All of the people who made the product, all of the people who contribute to the product, the developers, the operators, everyone. And it was, well, there are a lot of things you could say, but I figured as somebody who can think like an attacker, and as somebody who attacks Kubernetes, and who sees the results of the design decisions that are made by optimistic, happy people who don't think like attackers, I would love to be able to tell all of you how attackers think and give you some advice about how you might design your products that you're making, that you're developing on, that you're operating, to put yourself in an attacker's shoes and maybe secure your products a little bit accordingly. So let's talk about that. Hi, my name is Ian Coldwater. I am a lead platform security engineer at Heroku, where I specialize in hacking and hardening containers, Kubernetes, and cloud infrastructure. Before that, I was an independent penetration tester specializing in the same. I've been hacking on stuff since I was 11 or 12 years old, and have been playing capture the flag games and doing various things since. And all of that has helped me be able to think in certain kinds of ways that I've been realizing as I've moved into different parts of tech, not everybody thinks like. And Kubernetes is a pretty good example of that as a community. So, hi Kubernetes community, y'all are awesome. You are so wonderful. That openness, that optimism, that positivity and sense of possibility that makes you all such a joy to be around, and I'm serious, I'm being completely sincere. Like, this community is great and y'all are great. Also does reflect itself in the design decisions that you all have made. And so let's talk about that a little bit. And yeah, who do you design for? When you look at a cluster, are you looking for observability? Are you looking for scalability? Are you looking for ease of use and adoption? That's worked really well for you. This thing has grown a lot. People are really excited about that. It's getting adopted all over the place. And that's worked really well for you in terms of observability and in terms of scalability. That's all great. But in terms of security, the results have been a little bit mixed. Because I think that a lot of the time, who you design for are perhaps ideal users who are good people, who are using that feature in the way that you intend for it to be used. And that's awesome. When you're writing out your user stories and your user personas, you're probably writing them for those good folks, like you. The thing is that not all users are good. Not everybody is friendly. And not everybody is going to use your product in the way that you think they might. Some people are going to look at your product in an entirely different way. Because attackers have user stories too. As an attacker, I would like to pwn you. And as an attacker, when I look at the setup of your cluster, I'm not looking for ease of use. I mean, I'm looking for ease of use for me, but I'm looking for those things that you did where you left that one service open with an exposed port because Bob from marketing didn't feel like signing into the VPN. I'm looking for that pod that you didn't bother to put admission control on because it was a pain in the ass. I know, I get it, it is. And I'm looking for those things that seem like they're minor or like they're necessary for your use case that can be chained together for a larger series of exploits that can allow me to compromise your infrastructure completely. So, but enough about me. Let's talk about a theoretical attacker and how they might think. How do attackers think? Put yourself perhaps in the shoes of your friendly neighborhood goose. This goose is very intent on wreaking havoc and mischief in perhaps your garden or your shop. And you might look at your cluster and you might think of like, okay, I have all of my microservices neatly sorted into boxes. They're all together with each other. You know, I know where everything is. I have this under control. And that's great. And perhaps what this goose is thinking is, I'm going to create a distraction over here so that you go chase me over here, and then I'm going to move something off over here so that I can steal your resources or steal from your store. Perhaps they're thinking something like, I might just throw everything around for the lulz, because I can, because it's funny. Perhaps they're thinking something along the lines of, maybe I'm going to create this kind of incident so incident response gets really busy, and then I can go do something else. Because the thing is, geese, like hackers, have their own motivations. They're not always going to be the same motivations, but they're not going to be yours. And because of that, they don't actually care about yours. They don't care about your constraints. They don't care about Bob from marketing. They don't care about the fact that the one guy who set up the 1.6 cluster got fired immediately afterward and then you left it up. It doesn't really matter, because they're there for their own reasons, and they're going to do their thing anyway. Attackers don't think like defenders. Attackers don't think like developers or operators. What they're looking for is not what they see. What they're looking for is what they don't see. And the ways that those things fit together can be chained and can be exploited. And those things, again, can be minor or necessary, like the use of host path if you're using Docker and Docker, or the use of Helm tiller if you're using that for anything, which you shouldn't be. The use for the use of things like that, maybe you need them for some reason or another, or you wanted to develop on them. But those things can create holes that people can get into. And when they're thinking about those connections and what is running on a network and how those things connect, are you thinking that way? Do you even know what's in your cluster? Do you know everything that you're running on there? Do you know all of the services, what versions they're running, if they're updated, how they fit together? Do you know what's in your cloud at all? Entirely? I'm guessing that a lot of you don't. And the thing is that attackers are looking for that. And so you need to be looking for that. You need to know what's in your graph, what's running in that cluster. What do you have in there? What do you have in your cloud account? When you gave John from marketing that AWS instance to go play with that he left open, do you know that that's there still? Do you know what's in it? Because attackers are looking. And that means that you have to look too, in order to be able to design by putting yourself in the shoes of an attacker and looking to see what they see. So attackers look, they see what's in there, they see what's running, they see how those things fit together and how they're connected. And then what do? Attackers, although they may have different motivations, often have pretty similar workflows. They will look pretty much the same in a lot of cases. And that looks like, at first, looking, figuring out, like I said, what's in it, how those things connect. It looks like figuring out if there's vulnerabilities that can be found there. Is there tiller? Is there some outdated version of something that has a CVE attached to it? Is there something in the container or in any given pod that can be compromised or that already is? What kind of control can I get here? And if you can find something that can be exploited, just to get that one initial foothold, then you're in. And then you can figure it out from there. So, okay, can I escalate my privileges here? Is there a host path? Can I get access to the underlying node? Is there a host PID or host network or anything like that that will give me access to the host? Is the kubelet running on the same part of the control plane as that node? Can I get access to kubectl? What kind of cluster role bindings are there? Is there admission control at all? Is there admission control that will restrict me from being able to escalate my privileges in this context? Can I get access to etcd? Can I write to state? Can I move from this part of the cluster to another one? And can I jump out completely and get access to your cloud account if there's metadata or some other kind of information that's sensitive that will allow me to move laterally upward? And then, okay, I've escalated my privileges. I've moved laterally upward. Now I'm somewhere else. Now what do? What's running over here? Is there something that can be put together and chained? Is there something running that's vulnerable that will allow me to continue to move farther? And you just keep moving and keep getting as far as you can, figuring out what's happening there, figuring out how it can be exploited. And sometimes this can look very simple, such as this pod has no admission control, and now I'm root. Everything is running as privileged. That's a very short day. And sometimes that can look pretty complicated. Like, okay, I need to chain a series of exploits together in order to be able to get this kind of access. Okay, now I have this container compromised. Oh no, this one actually has really solid admission control. Now what do I do? Can I continue to move? And one sec. So you get as far as you can, and figure out how far you can get. And sometimes that's pretty far, and sometimes it's not really. And how can you stop that from happening? How can you stop that initial foothold? And how can you stop that movement? Well, you can design for defense. How do you design for defense? There are a few different ways. You can limit your attack surface by knowing what is running, knowing that you aren't running vulnerable versions of things, that you aren't running anything that doesn't really need to be, or that you don't have things in your cluster that aren't necessary. If I have shell access, that's fantastic. If I have sudo access, OMG, please don't put sudo in your containers, y'all. If I can, if there's things in there that maybe you just threw in there in case somebody might need it someday, that could be useful for me more than for you. And so limit what you have in there to only what you need. And also make sure that what's in there is running with the least privilege possible. You don't actually need to run your containers with complete privileges. You don't need to run your cluster so that everything is admin. Restrict those things with node restrictions and put admission control on. I know that the UX for admission control is really difficult, but it's really important, and it's one of the only weapons that you have as a defender to stop somebody like me from completely compromising your cluster. So, and then do this in layers. Practice defense in depth. So, if you have admission control on, and then I manage to get through the thin perimeter that you have, relatively speaking, and I'm in there and you don't have anything else protected, that's problematic for you. It's great for me. Because once I'm in there, you have complete faith in that perimeter, and you haven't done anything else from there. And if you can put as many barriers in my way as possible, so that not only is your attack surface limited, your blast radius, my blast radius is limited, it makes it a lot harder for me to do stuff once I'm in there, and it makes it a lot harder for me to move farther. So practice that defense in depth. Put in your resource quotas. Put in your node restriction. Put in good admission control. Use seccop and app armor and drop your capabilities when you can. The more of that when you do, then the less that I'm able to do, and that's great for you, bad for me, which is sort of what you want. And think about what your threat model is, because it's not going to be the same for everybody. So maybe you don't need to do all that. Maybe you do. But if you think about who it is that you're trying to protect, like what assets you're trying to protect, who you're trying to protect them from, and what capabilities those people have and what capabilities you have to defend against them, that can help you come up with a strategy about how to design for defense in your context. And that's really important, because otherwise you're just kind of throwing things at the wall. And you can lock down everything by default, and that's also great, and I recommend that you do it. But also, it's good to know exactly what you have going on in there, and then be able to plan around that for what you need. A good way to think about how to think like an attacker is to try thinking like an attacker yourself. I mean, you can take my word for it, and that's great. I mean, totally. But also, you can get some practice yourself by, for example, playing capture the flag games, which are not the capture the flag games that we played when we were kids on the playground. It's a kind of like way for hackers and people who attack computers to sharpen their swords. The flags aren't physical. You go into a server, you compromise it, and you get them. Maybe they're a text file or something else. Being able to do that, to get some practice yourself in what it is like to think like an attacker and what it is like to do attacker things in a place that is legal and you have permission to mess with, can be a really useful hands-on thing in being like, oh, this is actually just as simple as Ian just said it was. There's no admission control, my cluster's compromised. Oh no, It makes it much less academic and much more real, which can be a really useful thing. So there are beginning capture the flag sites like picoctf.com and overthewire.org can teach you some stuff. Things for Kubernetes specifically are kind of an emerging discipline, but generally speaking, playing CTFs will give you some practice in being able to think like an attacker and do some attacker things. Also, I do actually recommend playing the Untitled Goose Game because it gives you an idea of just like walking into a place, even if you are goose waddling, and getting an idea of like figuring out how things can be changed together and how they can be used for your purposes that are clearly not the purposes of the people responsible for keeping everything in good order and chasing you away with a broom. And you can do all of this. I believe in you fully. It is possible to secure your Kubernetes clusters against attackers. It's just really important to be able to put yourself in the shoes of attackers so that you can think like them, and you can look at your own resources, know what's happening there, and be able to design around being able to protect the resources that you want to protect against the folks that you want to protect it from. And yeah, I have actually no idea how long that was. I probably forgot something. Thanks, everybody.